It was an unseasonably warm day in Delphi, Indiana, a tight-knit town of just 3,000 people, and school was out for 13-year-old Abigail Abby Williams and 14-year-old Liberty Libby German. The best friends seized the free afternoon to do something adventurous. Go hiking along Delphi's historic trails. Around 1:30 p.m., Libby's older sister dropped the girls off near the Monon High Bridge trail, an old railroad trestle bridge over Deer Creek. The girls laughed and chatted as they walked the wooded path, Libby snapping photos on her phone to capture the moment. In fact, at 2:07 p.m., Libby posted a photo to social media of Abby walking on the weathered bridge, hands in her pockets, balancing on the rails. It was a candid snapshot of a carefree outing, and, unbeknownst to everyone at the time, the last proof of life from the two friends. They were supposed to meet Libby's father at 3:15 p.m. to be picked up, but the girls never showed up. By late afternoon, worry began to set in. Calls to the girls' phones went unanswered. Abby's mother and Libby's grandparents began searching the trail themselves when the teens missed their pickup. At 5:30 p.m., they reported Abby and Libby missing to the Carroll County Sheriff, and dozens of locals joined law enforcement in combing the area before nightfall. Flashlights bobbed in the dark woods, and voices shouted the girls' names, but there was no trace of them. Friends and family hoped the girls might simply be lost or injured. After all, Delphi was the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. But as midnight came and went with no sign of Abby or Libby, an unspoken dread settled over the community. Hundreds of volunteers and emergency responders resumed the search at first light on February 14, 2017. The Valentine's Day sun brought no comfort, only a heartbreaking discovery. Around noon, searchers found two bodies on the north bank of Deer Creek, about half a mile from the Monon High Bridge where the girls had been hiking. The location was in a rugged, wooded area not far from a property line, a place that had been just outside the initial search grid. By early afternoon, officials confirmed the worst. The remains were those of Abby and Libby. The carefree hike by two friends had ended in unimaginable tragedy. Police quickly announced that the case was being investigated as a double homicide, though they pointedly never released the specific cause of death or details of the crime scene to the public. The families in town were left only with horrific speculation about what might have happened in those woods. News of the girls' murders ripped through Delphi like a shockwave. Many residents had personally joined the search, only to learn that the vibrant eighth graders they prayed to find safe were gone forever. Schools brought in grief counselors. Tearful prayer vigils were organized almost immediately. How could something so evil strike in a town so small and close-knit? As one Delphi resident would later remark, "It felt like we lost our own children." The question on everyone's mind was the same. Who could have done this? In the midst of sorrow, investigators revealed a stunning clue, one left behind by Libby herself. Just 2 days after the murders, on February 15, 2017, Indiana State Police released a grainy photograph of a suspect taken from Libby's cell phone. The image showed a Caucasian man wearing blue jeans, a navy blue jacket, and a flat cap, walking on the bridge with his head down. This unknown figure, quickly nicknamed Bridge Guy, was reportedly seen on the Monon High Bridge around the time the girls vanished. Even more chilling, Libby had managed to record an audio clip of the encounter. On February 22nd, authorities released a few seconds of muffled audio in which a man's voice can be heard calmly saying, "Down the hill." The voice is authoritative, firm, an ominous command. Investigators confirmed the recording came from Libby's phone, and they hailed the 14-year-old as a hero for having the presence of mind to capture these clues. In those terrifying moments, Libby knew something was very wrong, and her quick thinking meant the killer's image and voice were now key evidence. "Guys, down the hill," the man is heard saying on the fuller recording released later, suggesting he was ordering Abby and Libby off the bridge and toward the wooded area. A still frame from Libby's video shows the suspected perpetrator, dubbed Bridge Guy, walking toward the girls on the Monon High Bridge. This image, along with an audio clip of his voice saying "down the hill," was recovered from Libby German's phone and released by police. The public was haunted by that brief audio clip and photo. Although grainy, the image of Bridge Guy, hands in his pockets, walking with a purpose, and the sound of his voice created an eerie snapshot of the killer. The suspect appeared to be a white male, perhaps middle-aged, but it was hard to tell. Investigators pleaded with everyone. Look at this photo. Listen to this voice. Someone out there must recognize him. Tips began flooding into the Delphi homicide hotline at a staggering rate. For Libby's family, the evidence she captured was a bittersweet sign of her bravery. "Without her, we wouldn't be here," one officer said, emphasizing that Libby had likely saved lives by recording the man. Even in the final moments of her life, Libby fought to leave behind a clue. Despite the promising clues Libby provided, the identity of Bridge Guy remained a mystery. As days turned into weeks, Delphi found itself in the glare of national media, grappling with both grief and fear. Parents suddenly kept their children indoors after school. The trails that once symbolized wholesome outdoor fun were now cloaked in fear. The Delphi Police, Indiana State Police, the FBI, and Carroll County Sheriff formed a multi-agency task force, working around the clock on the case. Early on, investigators received thousands of tips from the public. Every lead was chased down, from local men who vaguely fit the image to out-of-state suspects, but none immediately panned out. By 3 months in, police had conducted over 500 interviews and were sorting through some 16,000 tips, yet no arrests had been made. Frustration and anxiety grew. How could someone commit such a heinous act and simply vanish? In July 2017, 5 months after the murders, authorities released the first composite sketch of the suspect based on eyewitness accounts. This sketch depicted a Caucasian man with a goatee, cap, and prominent nose, an image that burned itself into Delphi's consciousness. It was posted on billboards, featured on news broadcasts, and taped in shop windows all over Indiana. Yet, as time dragged on, the case seemed to be stalled. The reward for information ballooned as donations poured in, reaching $50,000, then $100,000, and eventually over $325,000 by 2021. But still, the killer remained unidentified. For the families of Abby and Libby, each passing day without an arrest felt like an eternity. Libby's grandparents, Mike and Becky Patty, and Abby's mother, Anna Williams, took every opportunity to keep the girl's story alive in the media, refusing to let the world forget. They handed out bracelets, shirts, and posters emblazoned with the tip line. The town's slogan became, "Today is the day," a hopeful refrain that the day would come when the killer was caught. Leads came and went. At one point in 2017, investigators' attention turned to a man named Daniel Nations, an Indiana native who had been arrested in Colorado. Nations had been living in Delphi at the time of the murders and was picked up later that year for allegedly threatening hikers with a hatchet in Colorado, a violent MO that raised eyebrows. Delphi detectives flew to Colorado to question him about Abby and Libby. For a while, the media buzzed with speculation that Nations could be Bridge Guy. But after investigating, the Carroll County Sheriff announced that Nations was no longer considered a major concern in the Delphi case. He was effectively cleared, just another dead end. The disappointment in Delphi was palpable each time a potential suspect surfaced and fizzled. This pattern repeated with several other persons of interest. The case was ice cold on the surface, but beneath it, law enforcement insisted they were steadily piecing the puzzle together. On April 22, 2019, just over 2 years into the investigation, a bombshell development was announced at a packed press conference. Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter told the public that the case was taking a new direction. With that, he unveiled a new composite sketch of the suspect. And it was shockingly different from the one released in 2017. The new sketch showed a significantly younger-looking man, clean-shaven with short, curly hair. Could this be the same person? Authorities explained that the investigation had shifted focus and that the old sketch was now secondary. They urged everyone to study the new face and watch how the man walks in the video footage from Libby's phone. For the first time, They also publicly released a snippet of that cell phone video, showing the suspect's awkward gait as he strode along the bridge toward the girls. In addition, an expanded audio clip was provided, in which the voice says, "Guys down the hill." Hearing the word guys made it even more gut-wrenching, confirming that the man was addressing Abby and Libby directly before forcing them from the bridge. The 2019 press conference breathed new life into the investigation. Within days, over 3,000 new tips poured in, pushing the total well past 42,000 tips by that point. Investigators said they were confident the killer was hiding in plain sight, and very possibly a local resident of Delphi or someone very familiar with the area. Superintendent Carter looked directly into the cameras and, in a message clearly intended for the murderer, said, "We believe you are watching this. We know this is about power for you. And soon we're going to know who you are." The implication was chilling. The killer might be blending into the community, perhaps even sitting in the room. Many in Delphi felt a shiver. Could it really be someone they passed at the grocery store, or who sat next to them in church? The notion that the perpetrator might have been living among them for years lit a fire under the town's resolve. Delphi residents redoubled their vigilance, and local rumors flew fast and furious about anyone who even vaguely resembled the sketches. The police, however, urged patience and warned that the public focus should remain on facts: the video, the audio, and the new composite sketch. Behind the scenes, law enforcement was indeed methodically tightening the noose. They just needed the right tip or a fresh piece of evidence to break the case open. Unbeknownst to the public, one significant lead would soon emerge from an unlikely place: the dark world of social media catfishing. In December 2021, nearly 5 years after the murders, investigators revealed a stunning digital lead. They announced they had uncovered a fictitious online profile named Anthony_Shots that had been active in 2016 to 2017 on platforms like Snapchat and Instagram. The profile featured the stolen photos of a young male model, portraying a wealthy, muscular teenager with sports cars, and was used to communicate with underage girls in the area. This Anthony_Shots account wasn't just a random tip. It came directly from the Delphi investigation. Police did not explain exactly how it tied in, but they implored anyone who had interacted with that profile to come forward. Soon, internet sleuths and reporters connected the account to a real individual: Keegan Klein, a 27-year-old man from Peru, Indiana. Klein had been arrested on unrelated child pornography charges in 2020. In a police interview transcript, accidentally released and later obtained by a true crime podcast, Klein admitted to being behind the Anthony_Shots profile and confessed that he had been in contact with Libby German through that account. Even more alarming, according to the police transcript, Klein's device had logged into the Anthony_Shots Snapchat account on the very day the girls were killed. And messages from that account suggested that, "I was supposed to meet that girl, but she never showed up," referring to Libby. This raised the terrifying possibility that Abby and Libby might have been lured to the trails under false pretenses by someone they believed was a teenage boy online. Klein, however, denied any involvement in the murders and insisted it was a bizarre coincidence he had chatted with Libby prior to her death. In the transcript, detectives told Klein they did not believe he was the actual killer, but they suspected he knew more than he was saying. At one point, they revealed he failed a polygraph when asked, "Do you know who committed these murders?" The Anthony_Shots angle cast an entirely new light on the case. Was the killer someone who had access to that account? Perhaps a friend or associate of Klein's? Or had Libby unknowingly arranged to meet a stranger from the internet that day? The public was left with more questions than answers. Ultimately, despite the promising leads from the Anthony_Shots investigation, authorities did not charge Klein in connection with the Delphi case. In 2022, Klein pleaded guilty to the child exploitation charges and was later sentenced on those counts. But the information gleaned from the catfishing profile may have quietly helped refocus the investigation. It highlighted a timeline and a possible premeditation to lure the girls. And it underscored one important fact: the killer could very well be someone who knew the community and the victim's routines. By late 2021, the pieces of the puzzle were coming into alignment, setting the stage for the breakthrough everyone had been praying for. On October 28, 2022, Delphi's long-held breath was finally released. Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter addressed the public in a brief, electrifying announcement. An arrest had been made in the Delphi double murders. After nearly 6 years of dogged investigation, the words everyone had waited to hear had arrived. The suspect was not a name from out of town or a figure from the internet. It was one of their own. Richard M. Allen, a 50-year-old resident of Delphi, was charged with 2 counts of murder in the deaths of Abby Williams and Libby German. For the community, it was a gut punch and a relief all at once. Allen was a local father, a husband, and even worked as a pharmacy technician at the CVS in the center of Delphi, a place where townsfolk might have chatted with him while picking up prescriptions. He had no obvious criminal history of violence. To learn that someone so seemingly ordinary had been living quietly among them for years, all while allegedly harboring this dark secret, was almost beyond comprehension. How can somebody do that and then just go on living life like nothing happened? Wondered Libby's grandfather, Mike Patty, voicing the community's collective astonishment. The arrest of Richard Allen was not a fluke or a lucky tip. It was the product of a meticulous investigation that finally connected the dots. In fact, it later emerged that Allen had actually come forward the day after the murders in 2017 to say he'd been on the Monon High Bridge trail that afternoon. He was interviewed by a detective at the time but gave no indication of involvement. His statement was documented as a routine tip and tragically misfiled due to a clerical error with his name, effectively causing it to slip through the cracks. For 5 years, Allen continued living in Delphi under the radar. It wasn't until a team of analysts and a fresh set of eyes in 2022 resurfaced, that old tip, that Richard Allen became a person of interest again. When investigators took a closer look, the puzzle pieces fell into place quickly. The evidence against Allen, once assembled, was powerful and disturbing. A newly unsealed probable cause affidavit revealed several key details kept secret for years. Libby's video had captured more than just down the hill. Investigators disclosed that one of the girls, either Libby or Abby, can be heard on the recording mentioning the word gun as the strange man approached them. This suggests the perpetrator was armed and used a firearm to control the girls. Indeed, Libby's video showed the man closing in and ordering them, "Guys, down the hill," implying he forced them off the bridge at gunpoint. A crucial ballistics match. At the crime scene, police found an unspent .40 caliber round less than 2 feet from one of the girls' bodies. This bullet had not been fired. It was theorized to have fallen from the killer's gun or ejected during a jam. Forensic analysis determined that this round had been cycled through a Sig Sauer P226 handgun owned by Richard Allen. In other words, the markings on the shell matched Allen's pistol, which he admitted owning since 2001. When questioned, Allen had no explanation for why a bullet from his gun would be at the murder scene. Witness sightings. Multiple witnesses came forward to report they'd seen a man on the trail that day who matched the bridge guy image. One particularly telling account was from a woman who noticed a muddy and bloody man walking away from the trails around the likely time frame of the murders. He was wearing a blue jacket and jeans and looked as if he had been in a fight. Details that in hindsight fit Richard Allen's appearance and the attire he said he wore that day. The suspect's own statements. Back in 2017, in his initial interview, Allen had placed himself at the scene. He said he was hiking that afternoon on the trail, that he'd gone out there to watch the fish in the creek, and that he was wearing blue jeans and a dark jacket. In a follow-up interview in October 2022, Allen again admitted he'd been on the bridge and was wearing a blue Carhartt jacket and jeans, which precisely matches the man in Libby's photo. Allen insisted he saw no one except maybe a few girls. He claimed he passed juvenile females on the trail and told them hi, and was otherwise just a witness. But his story raised red flags given the other evidence. In-custody admissions. Perhaps most damning, Richard Allen allegedly confessed multiple times while in jail. According to court documents later unsealed, Allen had a phone call with his wife in April 2023, during which he admitted several times that he killed Abby and Libby. He also made incriminating statements in other recorded conversations. His defense would later claim these utterances were the result of deteriorating mental health, but prosecutors took them as partial confessions. When the probable cause affidavit was finally released, the public learned just how much evidence the police had quietly gathered. The picture painted was of a man who had been right there among the search parties, watching the investigation play out, thinking he had gotten away with it. Richard Allen pleaded not guilty to the charges, maintaining his innocence even as the evidence mounted. His arrest brought a rush of relief to Delphi. Parents slept a little easier knowing a suspect was behind bars. But it also renewed the community's anguish. The families braced themselves for the next chapter, a grueling trial to finally prove Allen's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. In the fall of 2024, the eyes of the nation once again turned to Delphi as Richard Allen's trial began. Jury selection commenced in October 2024, moved from Carroll County to a larger pool in Allen County due to the intense publicity. It had been a long time coming, over 7 years since Abby and Libby's lives were taken. Family members who had attended every press conference and prayed for justice now sat in the courtroom day after day, steeling themselves to hear the grisly details of what happened to their girls. Through the trial, prosecutors laid out the case described in the affidavit. The video, the audio, the bullet, the witnesses, the phone records. A tapestry of evidence that, when woven together, pointed squarely at Allen. The defense, in turn, tried to poke holes where they could. They suggested the investigation had gaps and even floated wild theories involving other potential suspects or strange ritual elements, a desperate attempt to cast doubt. But to the jury, the core facts were steadfast and unshaken. On November 11, 2024, the verdict came. Richard Allen was found guilty on all charges for the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. He was convicted of multiple counts of murder, including felony murder, for killing the girls while kidnapping them, and knowing murder. Gasps and tears rippled across the courtroom as the verdict was read. Some jurors later said the deciding factor was, above all, Libby's own evidence, her video and audio, which placed Allen at the scene and revealed his actions. Delphi finally had the answer to who was responsible. A month later, on December 20th, 2024, Allen faced sentencing. Dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit and shackles, he stood before Carroll County Judge Fran Gull. The judge, reflecting on the depravity of the crime, sentenced Richard Allen to 130 years in prison, 65 years for each girl's life he stole. It was effectively a life sentence for the 50-year-old man. In the courtroom that day, for the first time, the families had a chance to directly address Allen and speak about the impact of his actions. The statements were heart-wrenching. Libby's grandmother, Becky Patty, through tears, told the court, "I can never change my choice to let Libby and Abby go to the trails that day." Those words carried the weight of endless nights of guilt she had felt. Even though no one could have imagined such danger in letting two girls enjoy a sunny afternoon. Becky expressed hope that Allen would be haunted every day in prison by the same fear and terror he inflicted on the girls. Libby's mother, Carrie Timmons, described how Allen's brutality created a path of destruction for two families and an entire town. "I was blind that such evil existed so close to home," she said, her voice breaking, a sentiment many in Delphi shared. Abby's mother, Anna Williams, and grandparents also spoke, painting pictures of the birthdays and graduations that will never come. Abby would be 21 now. Libby would be 22. "I've watched her friends grow up, graduate, go to college," Abby's grandmother, Diane Erskine, said. "And I wonder how many great-grandkids were murdered that day, too." In one of the most poignant revelations from the trial, Diane noted that Abby's last known words, captured on Libby's phone, were, "Don't leave me." The two girls had clung to each other in their final moments. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The judge addressed Richard Allen directly, stating that in her 27 years on the bench, this crime ranked among the most heinous she had ever seen. She spoke of the extraordinary impact on the families and community, emphasizing how the pain would ripple for generations. When given a chance to speak, Allen chose to say nothing. He showed little emotion, even rolling his eyes at one point, which the judge sharply called out. As he was led away, Libby's grandfather, Mike Patty, called out that Allen should stand up and take accountability. "Don't you dare make us go through an appeal." It was a final plea from a grieving family member, urging the convicted killer not to prolong their suffering with further legal maneuvers. Outside the courthouse, as the December light waned, crowds gathered. Some hugged and cried at the sight of justice served. Others left flowers beneath photos of Abby and Libby. State Police Superintendent Doug Carter, who had been the public face of the investigation for so long, said quietly, "We're extremely proud of how these girls helped us to find the truth." Indeed, in a news conference, prosecutor Nicholas McClelland thanked the victims themselves. "Abby and Libby," he said, "helped catch their own killer." Their presence of mind to record video and audio had been the crucial break. The grainy video of a stranger on a bridge, captured by a brave young girl, was now perhaps the most important piece of evidence to ever come out of a cell phone in a murder case. The tragedy of Abby and Libby profoundly altered the fabric of Delphi. In the months and years after the murders, when no suspect had a face or name, the community lived under a shadow. Fear, anger, and sorrow were constant companions, but so too were resilience and unity. The support and solidarity in Delphi became its own remarkable story. Neighbors looked after each other's children. They hung purple and teal ribbons, the girls' favorite colors, on trees, mailboxes, and lampposts as symbols of hope and remembrance. Many residents kept porch lights shining orange every night, a gesture that started on the one-year anniversary when the families asked people to leave an orange light on as a beacon for Abby and Libby. The soft orange glow became a nightly vigil of its own across Delphi's neighborhoods. Each year on February 13th, the community gathered for candlelight vigils to honor the girl's memory. 1 year after the tragedy, hundreds crowded into the Delphi United Methodist Church, lighting candles that illuminated tear-streaked faces as prayers and memories filled the sanctuary. On the anniversary in 2018 and 2019, the bridge trail remained closed, but people walked in procession to the trailhead, leaving flowers and stuffed animals at a makeshift memorial near the Monon High Bridge. The message in Delphi was clear. We will remember. We will fight for justice. The case bound the town together in an extraordinary way. Residents organized food drives and charity events in the girls' names. They printed T-shirts. They even adopted the motto, Libby and Abby, stronger together. This unity gave the families strength to keep going. Perhaps the most inspiring tribute is the Abby and Libby Memorial Park, a 20-acre park and sports complex that now stands as a living legacy on the outskirts of Delphi. In the years after the murders, the Williams and German families channeled their grief into creating something positive and forward-looking. They formed a nonprofit and raised funds to build a park complete with ball fields, playgrounds, and an amphitheater, the kind of place Abby and Libby would have loved. Abby was a creative soul who played saxophone and loved volleyball. Libby was a spirited softball player and avid swimmer. The park would celebrate all those passions. In 2020, the project even won a grant from the NBA's All-Star Legacy Initiative, recognizing its community importance. By the fall of 2021, Abby and Libby Memorial Park was ready to be dedicated. At the dedication ceremony, over 30 vendors and countless supporters showed up. There were softball games on the new diamond, free food, music performances, and kids laughing on the playgrounds. The air that day was joyful, a stark contrast to the sorrow of 2017. Abby's grandfather, Eric Erskine, spoke at the ceremony, his voice breaking as he explained how they had decided to channel the girl's memory into a positive force for generations to come. Every time we have something out here, whether it's just a softball game or a concert, people are reminded, it's the Abby and Libby Memorial Park. added Libby's grandfather, Mike Patty, with a proud smile. The families cut a ribbon, and as balloons in purple and orange floated upward, the crowd erupted in applause. Abby and Libby's presence was felt in every corner of that park. In the laughter of children playing and the crack of a bat hitting a softball, Delphi found a beautiful way to remember its lost girls. Not for how they died, but for how they lived. Now, with the conviction of Richard Allen, Delphi has finally seen justice served. But the journey is not over. Appeals may be filed. Debates and theories about the case still swirl on the internet. Some in the community continue to ask why. Why these girls? Why Delphi? Those answers may never fully come. What is clear is that the spirit of Abby and Libby endures. The case that was once known as the Delphi Murders, still no answers, is now at least partially answered. The killer was one of their own, hiding among them, and thanks to an incredible effort by law enforcement and the courage of two girls who left vital clues, he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. As Delphi moves forward, it does so carrying the memory of two friends who loved life, loved their families, and loved each other. In the dark saga of this crime, there were also heroes. The police who refused to quit, the volunteers who searched, the community that kept the faith, and Libby German herself, a 14-year-old who, in her final act, ensured that evil would not prevail. Superintendent Carter's words from 2019 now ring true. Today is the day. It took time, but today is that day. The day when Abby and Libby's families can finally say that a measure of justice has been achieved. Yet, justice is a cold comfort in the empty chairs at graduations, in the birthdays that pass without celebration. As Libby's grandfather Mike Patty said in court, "There's no closure for us, but there is resolution, and there is the hope that Abby and Libby's legacy will continue to inspire goodness." Delphi, Indiana will never forget February 13th, 2017. Two bright young girls went for a walk on a familiar trail and never came home. For 5 years, their murders hung over the town with still no answers. But Delphi's determination never wavered, and neither did the evidence left on a teenager's smartphone. In the end, the quiet voices of Libby and Abby, echoing down the hill, cried out for justice, and were finally heard.